Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Computomics podcast. Our guest today used to work for the chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court and today is the CropSustaiN Mission Director of the BNI Wheat Initiative funded by the Novo Nordisk Foundation. Welcome, Victor Kommerell.
Hi, hello, Anna. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. I mean, already in the intro, we can tell, you have had quite the interesting journey in your profession and life. Mm-hmm. And as we like to start with a little icebreaker here at the Computomics podcast, I've learned that you also took a sabbatical once and wrote a book during that time, The Transformation Journey. What gave you the impetus for this sabbatical and what was your biggest takeaway from that time?
Oh, good question.
Well, we're starting with the tough ones,
It turned from a half-year sabbatical to a full-year sabbatical because another employer that I used to work for couldn't take me back. So they also had to give me some money. So I had a lot of money. So I could really be free and not be, I think the key takeaway was not be projectized. So my life beforehand was very much timed, planned, as if the job I was doing was also my private life, and that didn't do me much good. So letting it go was the idea, and it worked out.
Do you have like a main takeaway from that time? Because it is special to have that within like your professional life, to have such a relatively long time to be free and to just...
I really wish it were more common. In fact, I asked my boss recently, could I have 3 months off? And he said no. And I was really annoyed. So I really wish it were more common because there are phases in your work life where you really need to take a breather. Mm-hmm. And instead of switching jobs, which is the other way of doing it, I think that could be built in. It's not a solution for everything, but it's one of the measures one should have in the HR policy package. And there's 2 books I wrote, and one was more about the grotesques, a pet hobby of mine. And I spent a lot of time in Italy and went to lots of art libraries to learn about them and see them in the flesh, because you have a lot of examples of grotesques still everywhere in Italy in any shape or form. And then in the end, after the sabbatical, it turned into a book project. And the other one was this was more about, where does the idea of a sabbatical come from? That's the Transformation Journey book. So that was just in German, it's Kleine Kulturgeschichte des Sabbatjahres. And it's just fascinating how from, 2000 years ago, leave the field fallow in the 7th year, how that moved into late 19th century professors taking sabbaticals. And then, modern times, our times, this thing of take off professionally, as an HR policy practice. And then there's all other kinds of other things in parallel as well. Like sabbaticals have a lot to do with pilgrimage. Yeah. So fascinating stuff, actually. Yeah.
Very interesting. And I think maybe in some ways this also kind of bleeds into your actual main work, right? You did have, and you said one other way, except for sabbaticals, is switching jobs. You did that quite a bit, I feel like. Your career path did not start in agriculture. You were a business consultant at Perot Systems, so it's kind of infotech, I would say. Change management leader at NATO headquarters. Then, as we mentioned, you worked for the chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. So how come you decided to move into agriculture by joining the CGIAR? For those who don't know, that's the Consultative Group for International Agricultural Research. What triggered that?
CGIR is the acronym with no name.
It used to, though, wasn't it? Formally?
That's right. And really, everybody gets it, Consultative Group, Agricultural Research Centers, it kind of works, and it's often abbreviated CG. And now they made it really complicated by calling it the CGIR Global Partnership for Food Secure Future or something, right? It has nothing to do with the acronym. And I think the CG's been working on rebranding itself for the last 5 years. It's not taken a decision.
Well, sometimes these transformation processes are tough. Yours didn't take as long, but you decided to switch as well, to transform. Why did you go into agriculture?
Yeah, so it was a lot of 2 coincidences. I was a bit sort of lost professionally, and a colleague of mine from NATO, who was the HR director at the end there, had moved to one of the CGIR centers, and said, "Look, do you have do you have a consultancy where I could just, be busy and figure out what I should be doing next?" I said, "Yeah, well, actually, we do." And it was developing together with the CGIR gene banks. So that's the 10 of the CGIR centers hold these seed collections or, tree collections or in vitro, like banana collections. They maintain them so that when researchers need to use some of that, they have access. That's the sort of what they call the gene banks. And they had a World Bank funded project, and they were supposed to figure out their future, like a 2020 strategy, it was called, collectively as a group of gene banks. And that's where I assisted them in that process, like a moderator, facilitator kind of thing. That was my job. So that's how I got to know the CGIR.
Interesting.
And I got to know the most integrated and the most, in many ways, not the most valuable, but the most, so like the core baseline part of the CGIR. Because without those seeds, you're not going to do research about novel genetic diversity. You've got to have access to genetic diversity somehow. And that is a physical thing. It's not a digital thing.
Physical thing in a digital world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, so that's how I got to know CG and gene banks and a little bit about breeding and agronomy. I mean, I had no bloody clue. But I knew about developing strategies.
Right.
And I was not pretending to know better about gene banks, obviously. And in that time, you had one of those CGIR reform processes, which happen more or less every 7 years, like a sabbatical year. And because of that change process, the CIMMYT, the center I work for in Mexico, they needed to hire a research program manager. And in this case, it was for the CGI research program on wheat and wheat-based systems. So breeding and agronomy, everything about wheat globally. And so a colleague from that gene bank group said, "Why don't you apply?" And I said, "Why should I do that? I know nothing about ag and whatnot. They wouldn't take me seriously." And he said, "Don't worry. We have enough scientists. They all know about ag, but we need to run a program."
Right.
Okay. So
I think
they
that's
actually hired
interesting.
me then. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think sometimes there's real value in merging the expertise, in this case ag, right? Ag expertise with an outside perspective, and then expertise in management, in strategy development. And if there's like a really good exchange, rather than having experts from just one field that may be blind to certain other outside world factors, let's say.
Yeah, the biggest, you're in Tübingen, right? Which is a lovely old university town. There's really nothing more stupid than letting scientists become project leads, department heads, or whatever, because most of them are completely incapable. And that's true. Or let's put it positively, you really have to watch out. Scientists have many talents. Some are very good networkers. Some are very good team leads. So use those people to take roles such as mine, or just bring people in from somewhere else, for goodness sake. So if you want interdisciplinarity, you can also do that via bringing in people in the management jobs, and they happen to come from a bit of a different discipline. And also they're good research program managers. Yeah. That could be interesting.
I mean, we're going to get off topic if we go too far down that road, but I think we can agree on that. I wonder, today you are the director of the CropSustaiN Mission, right?
Yeah.
It's like a 4-year, $21 million BNI wheat initiative. I'm sure there too you need an interdisciplinary team. Can you tell us a little bit about that initiative?
Sure. So it's CropSustaiN with a big N, and the big N is the reference to the nitrogen planetary boundary. You may have seen that big circle picture with all these different planetary boundaries. And the one that we've crossed already very severely and repeatedly is the nitrogen one. I think the phosphorus one as well now. And I think there's another one as well, but I don't know how them on my head.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the big picture driver. Roughly speaking, what if about half of global wheat area, which is half of 240 million hectares, it's still the most widely grown crop.
Mm-hmm.
What if half of that wheat area is grown with nitrogen efficient wheat that results in, everything, pests and diseases, no problem, you're covered. Yield, yeah, it's no loss. Yeah, don't worry. And less nitrogen leakage through the water
Mm-hmm.
and less nitrous oxide emissions from the field and less ammonia volatilization.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big dream.
And why is it so important? I mean, you obviously hinted at it, but if you can put it in the word, why is it such a
It will be a
big domino?
What is the best bet mitigation pathway in agriculture? It's not CO2, it's nitrous oxide, reducing nitrous oxide. Mm-hmm. That's the big one, the best one. So there's lots of different ways of doing that. And one way is the breeding seed-based pathway, mm-hmm. where because you give the seed to the farmer, this effect happens in the soil. It's a seed-based pathway. And what is in the seed? In the seed is biological nitrification inhibition. So the nitrification is the stuff that ultimately leads to these emissions and the leakage. Mm-hmm. So if you keep the nitrogen more stable in the soil, then the plant it's easier for the plant to keep pulling up the nitrogen because it needs it for different mm-hmm. purposes. That means it improves nitrogen or NUE, or the plant. Nitrogen plant uptake improves per plant, mm-hmm. and that has the other effects of reducing the pollution effects as well. And that's sort of the basic logic. And why that happens is because the plant with its roots, they have exudates, like little globules, mm-hmm. and they talk to the soil. But it's that way, the plant talks to the soil via the roots. It's not the other way. And that is how the microbes in the soil, in the microbiome, in the rhizosphere, they then do things together with those enzymes. And one of them is to keep the ammonium stable in the soil. And then the plant, it's easier to uptake the end.
Interesting. And I mean, you've explained it really well. Like, we're trying to reduce the nitrogen footprint through the seed pathway, as you called it, right? Seed breeding pathway.
Seed-based breeding-based pathway, because there's mm-hmm. other pathways, agronomy practices, fertilizer practices. There's the other side of the coin, biological nitrification fixation. Mm-hmm. So that's really part of an agronomic pathway. If you improve the fixation ability of legumes, and that also has a positive effect on when you grow the cereals afterwards or before mm-hmm. in the rotation, that's the agronomic pathway for us.
And the sound, like, as a principle, like, it's like really easy to understand in a way, but I'm sure it's not that easy to achieve. So how are you going about it?
Oh, it's really easy.
Oh, really? Okay. So
we've basically done it. It's
oh, nice.
So this is with Novo Nordisk Foundation. We've been involved in this topic since 2015. Together with JIRCAS, a Japanese research institution that's focused on the Global South, works with a lot of CG centers. There's a guy in there called Subarao, who's been pushing this topic and working on it, wheat, sorghum, other crops, for a long time. First discovered this thing sort of in the 60s. So that's sort of the pathway, the research timeline. So we got involved 2015, we put in, I ran a research program, the CGI research program on wheat, so I could afford, together with my boss, Hans Brown, to put some seed investment money in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because most of the work was done by JIRCAS at the time. And then some of the pre-breeding or some of the lines development would then happen later at CIMMYT, not just in Japan. So this was all happening on a shoestring budget. I mean, if we had more than together,
Hmm.
Jerkas and CIMMYT, more than 400K available, that would be like a miracle.
Whoa.
That
Okay, that
basically
is
means,
shoestring.
yeah, I mean, that basically means, 2 people full time or 6 people half time or whatever. I mean,
Hmm.
and remember the cost of, research station, blah, blah, blah. So when the Novo Nordisk Foundation came in now, their attitude, high risk, high reward, 21 million 4 years, that's 5 million a year. Sounds like a lot. I mean, I think it should be more, but that's obvious. Um, so this is somebody taking a risk, and we haven't seen donors who work with us,
Mm.
maybe different for other donors, taking such risks and
Mm.
looking at the reward too. So that's very exciting. It's also a different way of working with the foundation, very peer-to-peer. So we co-designed the proposal. I was here sitting at the foundation, accompanying the stage gates at the foundation. And we already, as we were hoping that the board would say yes, it could have said no. We were already planning with who can we partner with. So we've got 7 research tracks. So we're trying to be comprehensive about achieving this goal. And we have to be comprehensive because, as you said, it's not actually that easy. There's really super painful, complicated soils research where you have to prove that the B&I stuff in the end cycling that happens all the time in the earth and then back to the air and blah, blah, blah,
Hmm.
that the B&I stuff is net positive because it's
Hmm.
only part of that end cycling. And then we have to do breeding, pre-breeding. We've got to get that B&I trait into lots of different wheat lines. And they have to grow and they have to express across the globe. So
Hmm.
that's like 10 locations. Then the N losses, prove the N losses, 4 locations. No, that's how easy, you can spend 5 million very easily that way. So it's 45 partners, some in kind, like Agroscope, Swiss National Research Organization. We meet them at the International Winter Wheat Congress. Yeah, sure. We'll join you. Yeah, no. We have money. No problem.
Hmm.
We think this is great. Just send us the seeds. So they'll
Nice.
be part of the multi-location testing of these B&I lines. And then the it's not such a big challenge, but it's part of the package. It's all in spring wheat. Spring wheat is, associated with certain agroecologies and certain times, in
Hmm.
the seasons. And then there's winter wheat with the, vernalization, i.e., in winter it needs to survive
Hmm.
those between 6 and 60 days or whatever it is. And there we have to still stick in the B&I. So it comes from a crop wild relative. It needs to be bred into, crossed into the elite winter lines.
Hmm.
And there's progress, but it's not done yet to the level that you have in spring wheat. So
Ah.
that's also part of the work package of the CropSustain to get B&I into winter wheat. That means in total, you will have the B&I trait in a broader range of wheat growing environments than if you're only focused on spring wheat.
How much longer will the program run? We said it's a 4-year program, right?
Just started.
It
We've
just
got 4
started
years
in
basically from July.
okay, so 2024 through 2028.
Yeah.
And how will you be sharing the results, like the classic routes, like scientific publication, or how are you thinking about getting these results, both the physical seeds, but also the scientific results, or maybe some policy suggestions? You have
Yeah.
a strategy background. How are you going about sharing what this initiative does with the world?
So CIMMYT is one of the CG centers. Our mandate is international public goods. So we're not into keeping or hiding or not sharing anything. That is not true of all our partners, universities.
Mm.
Sure. So CIMMYT is international public good, open access, and the Novo Nordisk Foundation is the same. So that's the baseline. Everybody who joins us needs to understand. Now, there's always leeway, where we have to accommodate, certain university rules, for example, or whatever. But in principle, it's about sharing research data, germplasm, pre-publication,
Hmm.
private and public.
Mm.
Intergrain in Australia, INRAE in France, John Innes Center in London, in Norwich. They're all part of it. And they all will share research data pre-publication. So we can learn from each other.
Right.
And then, of course, you publish. So sharing knowledge via the classic academic route. And then we're going to have a scaling and markets advisory panel with people from the FAO and Australian Research Organization, and there's a UNEP unit here in Copenhagen focusing on climate smart solutions. And we will ask them to help us introduce this B&I topic as part of policy debate. The big thing will be like climate smart agriculture at COP, right? That's the big topic. And then below it are lots of little topics, and one of them can be B&I. So that's the way to start connecting to policy making circles once we have the evidence.
Of course, that must be the first step. Like, if you don't have evidence-based policy advice, then it's probably not going to go that far. Which, like, maybe as a final question.
Are you kidding me?
Maybe, I don't know.
Do you know how much non-evidence-based policy advice there is? Forget it.
Oh.
But it's not our job.
Maybe I'm too optimistic. I feel like if you're a research-based initiative, if you didn't work with evidence,
of course.
Then
and remember, it's never a black and white picture. It's always going to be gray. So we're going to probably find out that B&I is maybe not quite what we're hoping for. However, we found out something else about the combination of different secondary metabolites and how they work together. And that in itself is such interesting learning that'll be really useful to other scientists working on other solutions. So I'm quite optimistic on that score.
That's also cool. That can be super motivating to know there will be some impact on global agriculture. Maybe it's not the one we first envisioned, but through the process, we will get there. That's how I would summarize your point.
Absolutely. And then there's it's going to be a challenge to manage the depth and breadth of the research within the first 4 years. So, for example, there's University of Vienna Metabolomics Center. They could come in now and they could bring in several more omics layers in understanding not just the genetics of the plant, but also the genetics, the microbiology genetics of the soil. But because we don't know the exact interactions yet that well, step by step.
It sounds like you're very excited. Certainly comes across at the Outlook. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time to talk about this, Victor, but I hope you will be maybe back at some point, maybe in 4 years' time when we have kind of the project results there. If we don't get the chance, or if we want to know before, how can we stay up to date on the initiative?
So just type in CropSustain and CIMMYT, and it'll take you to the project page. And it's a very humble and basic project page, but we'll try and keep it updated, at least in terms of research progress. And
we'll do you one better. Actually, we'll put it in the show notes. So y'all, if you just hop on over there, you can see it and follow Victor's work and his team's work.
Of course, contact me as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Victor. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Anna. Pleasure talking.
Thank you for listening in today. Want to learn more? Then check out our show notes and more info on computomics.com. If you have questions or want to propose a next guest, please reach out to us at podcast@computomics.com.